Merry Christmas and happy fantasy football championship week for so many people out there. In today's show, I'm talking about 10 championship players that you need to add now, whether you need the help on your team or you just need to block your opponent so you can walk away with the hardware. Now this list is in no specific order, but let's start off at the top with Taj Spears of the Tennessee Titans. He's currently 58% owned, but go out there and take a look and see if he's available. He's going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. We know that Tony Pollard has been banged up. He's played in less than 50% of the snaps now in back-to-back ball games. But on top of that, Taj Spears has taken 4 of the 5 carries that the Tennessee Titans have had inside the 5-yard line. But on top of that, we saw Spears out-touch Tony Pollard just last week, and Spears has 4 touchdowns over his last 2 games played. Now in this matchup going up against Jacksonville, they allow the 3rd most fantasy points per game to the running back position. Now I'm sure Tony Pollard will still be on the field. He's got some incentives in his contract to hit. But with what we've seen from Spears the last couple weeks, I would snag him and stash him just in case. Now after Taj Spears, we got Alexander Madison of the Las Vegas Raiders. He's currently 57% owned going up against New Orleans. We know that Sincere McCormick and Zamir White are both on IR. We also know that Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah are going to be involved in this passing game in Las Vegas. We just saw Madison have a season high in targets with 7 last week. Plus, I think we can look at both of these teams, the Raiders and the Saints, and neither one of these teams are offensive juggernauts. They're really struggling almost weekly to put points up on the board. So with 2 low-scoring teams, the score should be relatively close, which means both teams should be able to run the football. In this matchup going up against New Orleans, they allow the 9th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. Alexander Madison may be out there on your waiver wire. How about Gus Edwards of the Los Angeles Chargers? 53% owned as of right now, going up against New England this week. Now we have a low-scoring New England offense, an LA team that is still playing to win ball games, and a New England defense that allows the 7th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. Now, obviously, Gus Edwards has not been setting the world on fire since J.K. Dobbins went down. However, he does have 4 touchdowns over his last 5 games. And in week 16, we saw Gus Edwards go out and have the most touches in a game that he's had since week 2. Now, if LA can hop out to an early lead, I would not be surprised if they hopped on the Gus bus a lot in the second half of that ball game. How about Trey Benson of the Arizona Cardinals? Currently 24% owned. They're going up against the Rams this week. However, full disclosure, we need to make sure he's even going to play this week. If he does not, if he is ruled out, then we need to consider Michael Carter. But the only reason we're even discussing these guys is because James Conner suffered a knee injury in week 16 that could cause him to miss some time, especially since the Arizona Cardinals have been eliminated from playoff contention. At this point, there's no reason for them to throw Conner out there and make this injury any worse. Now, Benson did miss last week in week 16, but there's a chance he could play this week in week 17 and be the lead back in Arizona. In a matchup going up against the Rams, they allow 19 fantasy points per game to the running back position. But like I mentioned here at the beginning, we need to pay attention to his availability. If he is not going to be able to go, then all of a sudden Michael Carter is the running back we want to roster in this backfield. He would be heavily involved in the passing game and really help you, especially in PPR scoring. Which will then bring us to our next name on the list. It's Robert Woods, or Bobby Trees for all you OG Headliner Nation members. Now he's only 1% owned and he's going up against Baltimore. The injury to Tank Dell and John Mechie being hurt is opening the door for Robert Woods. He was 2nd on the team in targets at the wide receiver position just last week in week 16. Now they're going up against Baltimore and they allow the most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers in the NFL. Houston is kind of just running out of options, but Robert Woods is in line to be their wide receiver too. And with the way that the Baltimore Ravens are currently playing and putting points up on the board, Houston is going to have to try to keep pace. They're not going to be able to run all 4 quarters with Joe Mixon. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot. Bobby Trees, Robert Woods could turn him to a check down option in week 17. Now, real quick before we dive into the rest of the list, I gotta shout out today's sponsor, SeatGeek. It is the week of Christmas, and if I know anything about a few of the dudes out there in Headliner Nation, you haven't even gone Christmas shopping yet. So if that's you, let me help you out a little bit. All you need is your cell phone. Head to your app store and download SeatGeek. With over 28 million downloads, they are the #1 rated ticketing app out there. There are more than 70,000 events on SeatGeek. The NFL playoffs are right around the corner. The NBA is in full swing. The NHL is officially back. But it's not just sports tickets, it's your favorite artist that's currently on tour. Get somebody a gift of a concert ticket. Because here's a cheat code, get one for yourself. Not only are you crossing a Christmas present off your list, you get to go and enjoy the experience yourself. SeatGeek takes tickets from all across the web. They put them in one place so you can make sure you're getting a good deal. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad. Use our code HEADLINERS at checkout for $20 off on SeatGeek right now. That's right, $20 off your first purchase with promo code HEADLINERS. Just be sure to check the link in the description of this video and download the app. But all right, let's go ahead and dive into the second half of the list here for the championship players that you need to add. How about Hollywood Brown of the Kansas City Chiefs? 34% owned. A lot of people didn't add him last week. They didn't know really whether or not he was going to play. Now he does have a tough matchup this week going up against Pittsburgh, but last week he was second on the team in targets with 8 in his very first game back. And you have to think that Kansas City is going to continue to ramp him up so he's 100% ready for the NFL playoffs. Now, a lot of defensive attention is going the way of Xavier Worthy. He's commanding deep field attention right now. But like I mentioned, this is not an easy matchup going up against Pittsburgh, but I would hate to be beat by Hollywood Brown in week 17. Is this a guy that you pick up and start? Maybe not. Is he a guy you pick up and stash and keep from your opponent just in case? Probably. How about Brandon Cooks of the Dallas Cowboys? He's 23% owned going up against Philadelphia. Now, CeeDee Lamb looked like he re-aggravated his shoulder injury, and Jalen Tolbert dislocated a finger. But what's most important here is we've seen the snap percentage of Brandon Cooks increase now in 4 straight ball games. Plus, he still has that big play ability, which really allows him to have a lower target share. In a matchup this week going up against Philadelphia, who always finds a way to put the ball in the end zone, Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys are going to have to throw the ball a lot. If CeeDee Lamb or Jalen Tolbert are not on the field this week, we could see a large increase in target share going the way of Brandon Cooks. How about Jaylen McMillan of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? How is this guy only 50% owned? He's going up against Carolina this week, but I really expected his ownership percentage to be up in the mid to high 70s with how he's been playing here as of late. He's now had at least 4 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown in 3 straight games. He's averaging over 12 yards per reception. Defenses are out there paying attention to the running game and Mike Evans. We also know that Cade Otton is hurt, and Sterling Shepard hurt his hamstring in week 16. Again, the dude is always perma-hurt. But on top of all of that, Tampa Bay needs to keep winning ball games. And with how Carolina has played here as of late, I could see them really challenging Tampa Bay and forcing them to throw the ball all 4 quarters. Now, after McMillan, we got a couple tight ends. The first one is Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans. He's currently 55% owned, and they're going up against Baltimore. And he's really forced into a bigger role now that Tank Dell is going to be out. Dalton Schultz has had at least 7 targets in 2 of his last 3 games played. He also has touchdowns in 2 of his last 3 games played, but most of all, it's all about the matchup. Baltimore allows the 9th most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. And with how Baltimore's scoring points, Houston is going to have to throw the ball all 4 quarters. We talked about this already when we were discussing Robert Woods. But this is the tight end position, and there are so many unknowns. It seems like every single week we have stud tight ends underperforming and random tight ends performing. We need to chase volume. We need to chase the guys who are getting targets. And right now, that's Dalton Schultz. And then lastly, we got Chig Okonkwo of the Tennessee Titans, only 8% owned going up against Jacksonville. And I've talked about him on this show for a couple of weeks now. He's now had at least 10 targets in back-to-back ball games. Jacksonville, they allowed the 10th most fantasy points per game to the tight end position, and Chigioko has really turned into the Binky of Mason Rudolph. With multiple wide receivers banged up and Tony Pollard not being 100%, I would not be shocked to see Chigakonkwo once again reach 10 targets. 10 targets from a tight end in week 17 for a fantasy championship. It may not be sexy. The ceiling may not be high, but the floor could be safer than a lot of other options out there. So there you have 10 players that you need to add to help your team or to block your opponent. At this point of the fantasy football season, you're playing chess, not checkers. We wish you all nothing but the best, and we're looking forward to Headliner Nation racking up the fantasy championships here in the next 2 weeks. Now, if you enjoyed today's show, do me a favor and hit the like button if you haven't already. And even though it's week 17, consider subscribing if you haven't done that yet either. Headliner Nation puts in work all 12 months of the year. Just because the season is ending doesn't mean the banger content ends. Now, before I get out of here for the day, I do want to take a quick second to wish you and yours a very Merry Christmas. I will be the first one to admit that you never know what you had until it's gone, so don't miss an opportunity to be with a loved one. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.